So here is my embroidery flower quilt from last year that I was talking about on my previous video. When I was cutting this, I cut into it. So here is how I'm going to fix this. Let me show you. Okay, so I have some grid interfacing. This was a scrap that was left over. And because this was used with the same grid interfacing, I thought, well, why not try this? So I gauged how deep the cut was. If you look, the cut is it's more than 1/4 of an inch. So I thought, well, I'll come in about 1/2 an inch. And so I cut this out. I folded this piece and cut this out, and I'll be able to like make a scalloped edge and fix this to where you'll never know. Most of these embroidery flower quilts are square, so I wanted to keep and I say square, it's a rectangle. I want to keep the squareness or the rectangle shape, but I think undulating the edges will add a little bit more feminine appeal to this, and it'll get rid of my boo-boo, and I'll be able to do this all the way down. So I'll cut, so whenever I bind this, I will have to use bias binding, and I will make a cardboard template from this piece of interfacing, and then that cardboard template I will somewhat be able to either cut up against or use my friction pin, trace it, and I'll trace all the edges all the way down using this, and it'll create a gentle wave, which I think will be great, and it'll fix my boo-boo. And in quilting, everybody, no matter how much you screw up, everything is fixable in quilting. It's just, you may have to work harder at it to fix it. You may have to let it go on the back burner for a long time before you figure it out. This has been, I made this boo-boo all the way back in July of last year, 2022. And I thought, well, I can just cut this off, but the amount of time and fabric and effort I have put into this, I didn't really want to lose 2 inches on one side. For one, the print is only 1 block away from having to the edge. So this is just 1 block away from the edge. So it would put the flowers right up against the edge. I didn't want to do that. It would also make it lopsided where I might be compelled to trim the other side too, and then that's twice as much work that I'm cutting away. So I think this is a great fix. And let me get some cardboard and I'll figure the rest out and post that next. Alright, so I've made my cuts on my cardboard template. My template is 9 inches long, and I know what the quilt measures, so whenever you make your template, you need to verify that the width and height of your quilt is divisible by the length of this template. I don't think mine is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the template, and I'm first going to go and I'm going to do all 4 corners. So I'll do this one, and also do it on the reverse edge, and I'll do all 4 corners, and then I'll come back and I may lay in a couple of these to where the undulation is not quite so much. I don't know, I've got to play with this and figure this part out. So the width of this, the undulation starts 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 inches. I could make this shorter by 2 inches, but I would still have an odd number, and I'm pretty sure it's an even number that I have at the finish. Let me do some math, and I'll pick up where I left off. Okay, so the solution is I've laid this out and I make a little tick mark here in my seam allowance for my binding. And I do that all the way down. And here's the last one. I know that this quilt is folded in half, so I'm not going to make the next tick mark. I will turn around and flip the quilt over on that same edge, and I will go ahead and I will do the tick marks. And then the middle one right here, after I get this cut, I'll show you the middle one will be the widest one, which is fine. I don't think it's going to visually make a difference. And that's how I'm going to do this. Okay, so I have my one edge trimmed all the way down. And the hunk in the middle is bigger. But it kind of accentuates where the most color is of the quilt, so your eyes are going to go to the color, maybe not so much the edge. So later on, after I get done doing all the edges, I'm going to come back and I'm probably going to round this edge, and I will demonstrate that next. Okay, so I have taken my template and marked where my corner is. If you look, I've made a little tick mark there and there. That's where my corner is. I went to my kitchen and got a cup, laid it on the edge, traced it around, and now this is going to be my corner template to mark. And let me show you that. All right, I have lined up my corners and then drew a line, and I will trim off this little bit. And it probably wouldn't have mattered. I probably didn't need to do this step, but I did. You can leave your corners as full corners, but you still have to use bias binding on this. So I thought, well, I'll go ahead and round the bend right there with bias binding. And that may have removed 1/4 of an inch off that corner. It may or may not make a difference in the quilt, but I guess we'll find out whenever I get done binding it. According to the Robert Kaufman app, yes, there is an app that will calculate bias binding, where the size of the square you need to cut. And I need to cut a 30-inch square. So I used an ombre or gradient fabric for the binding. Part of that binding actually matched the background of the whole of that quilt, and if you'll notice, you don't even notice the undulating edges on this. It did not take away from the quilt. You might be able to notice it more if it was on a bed that you see the edges, but you're looking at the quilt.